During World War II, there were many women who were found guilty of treason and serious crimes against their enemies. Many people refused to give in to the Third Reich and the evil dictators that they found themselves living under, and women joined resistance groups such as the French Resistance. But if they were found dissenting or not in support, then they faced some of the most serious punishments and even execution. Different execution devices were used, but many women were dragged into execution chambers, and they met their ends under the fallbeil, the German guillotine. This all-metal device claimed the heads of thousands within German prisons, and executioners bragged that they could take a head off within seconds of someone entering the chamber of death. Many of those who suffered this fate were only in their early 20s when they faced their execution, and some were even young mothers. In this video we look at the executions of the guillotined women of the Reich, and look at some of their stories. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. The fallbeil was deployed inside of Germany from the 19th century, and it became the preferred method of execution. When Hitler came into power, some executioners were still using a hand axe to take a head off, but he wanted a more reliable method. Inside of Nazi Germany, following Hitler's accession to power in 1933 until the end of the Second World War, the guillotine was used to execute 16,500 prisoners, and around 10,000 of these were in 1944 and 1945. Anyone who was dissenting or resisting to the regime in any way faced this punishment. Specifically, the fallbeil was a smaller and more compact device, and the executioners perfected the method of killing to bring death quicker. One executioner, Johann Reich, became so skilled with the device that he could take just 7 seconds for a head to be taken off someone from when the condemned entered the death chamber. He found that holding someone under the device was quicker and more effective. But the device became a symbol of Nazi oppression, and many women faced this guillotine very bravely. Plötzensee prison in Berlin became a place where 3,000 inmates were executed, and the guillotine there was found inside an execution chamber in a courtyard. The prisoners walked from the main jail to the chamber, and a bell rang out to tell the other inmates what was going to happen. Around 300 women were executed using that device there, and after their executions, their bodies were then released to Hermann Schever, an anatomist, who then carried out bizarre and horrific experiments upon the corpses of these female victims. On the 5th of August 1943, there was a massive series of executions carried out, and there were 16 people executed, including a number of women. Condemned that night was Cato Bonges von Beek, a member of the Rote Kapelle, who spied for the Soviets. She was condemned to death and had been tortured throughout her imprisonment for information. She strangely had a dream that she had been condemned to death amongst others, and years before had dreamed that she would be executed on a guillotine. Liane Berkowitz's fate that night was also very tragic. She was pregnant when she was arrested for being part of the same group, and she actually gave birth to her daughter inside of prison. She was still guillotined that same night, and was just 19 years old, dying 2 days before her 20th birthday. The executions of the women that evening were completely ruthless, and were carried out at intervals of around 3 to 4 minutes. Between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. that night, there were 8 women executed. Executions of women were carried out every few days, and these were mostly members of the German resistance groups. Many females were also deported to Germany, and they lost their heads inside of prisons. In 1944 this included Galena Romanova, who had been involved in helping others avoid persecution, and she hid those who were threatened with deportation to concentration camps. Many women who were linked to the French resistance were also sent to Plötzensee prison, where they were then executed. They were usually transported by train to these prisons, and they were then killed in German prisons away from the eyes of the locals, who would be disgusted at this fate. One of the most famous women who lost their heads on the guillotine was Sophie Scholl, a 21-year-old member of the White Rose movement. Sophie had been involved in producing leaflets calling on people to see through the regime and to defy and resist, and she was arrested following an incident at the University of Munich. She was quickly tried alongside her brother Hans and was sentenced to death. Her final words were allegedly, "It is such a splendid sunny day, and I have to go." Scholl was 21 when she was led into the execution chamber within Stadelheim prison, and executioner Johann Reich claimed she was the bravest person of the thousands that he ever had to execute. Other prison officials were also impressed by her bravery. There was an American woman who also suffered the fate of the fallbeil. Mildred Harnack was a celebrated writer, and she was also a member of the resistance. She had seen the fall of the Republic and the rise of Hitler and the Nazis. Harnack was involved with many resistance groups, and they cooperated with Soviet forces to pass over information to them about the Nazi regime, but she was then discovered and was arrested. She was an American citizen after all, but this did not stop her being condemned to death, and on the 16th of February 1943 she was executed by the guillotine. Her final words were alleged to have been, "And I too so loved Germany," and she was actually the only American executed upon the direct orders of Adolf Hitler. But one thing to consider is that the guillotine was not just used during the Second World War against women. It was deployed against them in the years before the conflict, upon those who offered any form of defiance. Lise Lerter Hermann was a mother and prominent communist, and of course these were the enemies of the Nazis. She had found herself marginalised, being excluded from studying at any university all across the country. She was found to have been colluding with other communists to carry out possible attacks upon infrastructure, but despite hundreds of thousands of people signing petitions all around the world for her release and the commuting of her death sentence, she was still executed by guillotine on the 20th of June 1938. Her body too was then given to the notorious anatomist Hermann Stever. The Nazis also executed people using the fallbeil inside of different occupied countries. Within Czechoslovakia, or the Reich Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, a fallbeil was installed inside the execution room of Pankrak prison. Most of the victims of this device were those Czech citizens who resisted the occupation. There were 175 women who were beheaded by the device inside of Pankrak, and the chief executioner, a German named Alois Weiss, was the one who was brought to perform these executions. So from 1933 to 1945, there were thousands of women, normal German people, who met a terrifying fate inside of German prisons and sites of executions. Many of these were condemned by the People's Court, and they suffered in their final moments. They must have thought about what was coming for them whilst they were on death row, and the truth was that inside some of the darkest rooms in Europe, they took their final breaths. The Nazis loved the use of the guillotine, as for them it offered ruthless and quick justice, and meant that they could rapidly deal with those who dissented and were a threat to them, literally cutting the head off the snake. Women were not spared this fate. Some were also hanged too, but the fact they were women did not see them be given any form of mercy inside of Nazi Germany. For them, they were just dangerous people who dissented and resisted against the dictator and his regime. Thanks for watching. Please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.